American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so I will turn it over to Mr. Raleigh.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Melton and members of the committee. So we originally had 2 items that were going to be on the agenda for discussion. We only have one, unfortunately. We had a presenter with a family medical emergency. So we'll only be talking about Part A, the Business Alliance Assistance Program today, and we'll save the other for a future committee meeting. So I will now turn the floor over to Lou Bonapane, our Chief of Council Services, to get this item kicked off.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. I think I'm here in my capacity as interim budget director talking about this topic today, which is fine.
That's an old hat for you.
That's right. So we're going to talk about, just as a reminder, and you've all seen some of this information on the other committees that you serve on, but as far as the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, Raleigh was awarded $73.2 million in direct funding from the federal treasury. Staff looked at that amount and the strategic plan and input from council and presented a phased approach to how we wanted to program that funding. And then just as a reminder, the federal government is requiring that recipients, including the city of Raleigh, must obligate or encumber all the funding that we've received by December 31st, 2024. So we got a little more than a couple of years to do that, accomplish that, and the funds must be fully expended by December 31st, 2026. So we are all working toward those deadlines. Prior funding allocations that the council has approved, including allocations for community health, $13 million, housing and homelessness, $10.5 million, economic recovery, infrastructure, nonprofit agency support in the amount of $3 million, public safety initiatives, $2 million, and $500,000 for community engagement. These are the funding that remains in the amount of $24 million. And so staff had also proposed that we break that amount of money in support of the following project categories, including economic recovery, housing and homelessness, community health, transit and infrastructure allocations, and the details are there. And so those project categories were referred to the various council committees in association with the your adopted strategic plan. Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community has already looked at and approved the $320,000 allocation, or 180 of that for the produce project, and still has the housing and homelessness allocation to consider. The Growth and Natural Resources Committee, the Climate Action Plan for Renewable Energy item was referred to GNR, and as well as various stormwater projects, both of which were approved, and council has subsequently authorized staff to proceed. So here we are today at the Economic Development and Innovation Committee. We have 2 items, as Mr. Raleigh mentioned, the Business Alliance Assistance and the Pathways Center investments. So we're gonna hold the discussion on the Pathways Center investments, and I'm gonna turn it over now to staff with the Housing and Neighborhoods Department to talk about the Business Alliance Assistance. And I think we have Mark Weldon here from Housing and Neighborhood.
Thanks, Lou. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Mark Weldon from Housing and Neighborhoods. I'm the Small Business Development Manager for the City of Raleigh, and I'm here today to talk about Business Alliance support using ARPA funds. The emphasis on business alliances has grown since the beginning of the pandemic, but these are partnerships that go back further in time than that. Why are we proposing using ARPA funding in this ecosystem today? First of all, we have learned that our Business Alliance partners have been fabulous partners getting us through the pandemic, but just as general economic development partners, small business development partners, they are really our eyes and ears, feet on the street with Raleigh's small businesses. Addressing the small business needs We certainly have much to do still to get businesses by through the COVID challenges, the pandemic challenges. Businesses continue to struggle. And we also know that we have, not just because of the pandemic, but magnified by it, is challenges that involve equitable economic development. Just as a reminder of who the various alliances are who we partner with, I think when we first met with this committee a couple of years back and had kind of a meet and greet introduction with business alliances, we had about a dozen. We're up to about 17 of them now. We've added a couple of special area interest ones, a couple of new geographies, but I won't read them all to you. Just know that there's quite a few alliances out there who we are working with. For the goals of what we are proposing today, we thought it was important to make investments that were not just stopgap, getting a business over the next month of payments. Try to come up with ways that create enduring changes that just generally stabilize the small business environment for the city. Certainly an emphasis on minority and woman-owned businesses. As part of ARPA, that would be an impacted community that would make that a priority. We have focused a lot on input from our alliance community. We've had a couple of very insightful brainstorming sessions. I wish we could have had twice as many, honestly, but we will be continuing that conversation, and we've gotten to know a lot of our shared interests over the past 2 years with the pandemic. So we feel like we have gotten a pretty good amount of input from our alliance partners. It's going to be very important. You'll see this showing up on asterisks throughout the presentation with ARPA. There are a lot of strings attached, especially when we talk about economic development programs. We have to thread the needle not only on the federal side with ARPA requirements, but also the very limited and strict North Carolina requirements around economic development. And finally, the real goal is to come up with solutions that will give us the flexibility to offer both citywide universal solutions as well as some solutions that are unique to our various business alliances. You'll see a flavor of this slide for the next 3 slides, and I'll walk you through at least an introduction to what we're talking about. 3 different categories are where we are proposing to invest. One category would be universal projects. These would be programs that may be run by the city. They may be investments in the community that would benefit alliances, whether they were a small one, a large one, a new one, and a well-established one, a geographical one, a functional one. There are programs that will benefit small businesses in general across the city, so we want to invest there. The second category would be tailored projects that would be unique to individual alliances. Maybe an alliance in one part of the city has entirely different needs than an alliance in another part of the city, so we want to have flexibility to work with that. And then finally, what we haven't talked about yet are the new and emerging alliances. The 17 members you saw on that chart, there may be 1 or 2 out there that are still over the horizon that are going to be able to help us continue to flesh out our alliance footprint in the city of Raleigh, knowing that the odds of a business having a voice and being successful are enhanced when they're supported by a business alliance. The asterisk at the bottom, I just was half kidding about it, but you will see it that ultimately whatever we decide to do, it will have to be compliant with ARPA and North Carolina rules for economic development. These are the same chart again, like I say, just with a few examples under each of the buckets, what this could look like. Some of the input that we got at our brainstorming sessions and some other conversations along the way. Universal projects could include things like business inventory, business maps. We don't really have a precise handle on exactly where all of our 30 or 40,000 small businesses are in our city. So this may be a great opportunity for us to finally get our arms around that question and get a family snapshot of today, as well as a process that will allow us to keep up with what that looks like in the future. competitive market data for small businesses trying to open a business, and then more generically, an alliance playbook, best practices, so we can both use that as a resource for existing alliances and also as a resource for groups that may be interested in forming their own grassroots business alliance using best practices that are out there from other municipalities. Tailored projects, some examples of these may include some foot traffic, customer demand type projects, maybe placemaking. We could be talking about banner brackets that you could put streetlight banners in a shopping district, what have you, clean and safe type of initiatives that could make an area more appealing or compelling for shoppers to come in. Also from an alliance infrastructure themselves, these are organizations that all have various skill sets and expertise, and perhaps there are ways to assist the alliances themselves as organizations with things like strategic planning, organizational professional development. Finally, some examples of new and emerging alliances, the kind of needs that they would be interested in would be when you are creating a new alliance, you certainly need to create a website, a web presence, a social media presence, new business directories, who all is in the alliance, so other business members can understand who is in the mix with them. And then also promotional campaigns. An alliance doesn't do any good if nobody knows about them, so there are probably going to be investment needs for new and emerging alliances to help businesses as well as their surrounding communities know that they are there. Finally, the price tags that we are assigning to each of the three categories would be $100,000 for the universal projects that would apply citywide, $300,000 for the tailored projects, I'll come back to that in just a second, and then new and emerging alliances for $100,000, so the total is $500,000. And for the tailored projects, knowing how many business alliances we have, there's no, we don't know whether a few will be engaged or all of them will be engaged, but generally we'd be looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 per alliance, just on an average basis to get to that $300,000. Next steps. Like all the other ARPA programs, we're hitting the ground running and doing a lot in a very short period of time, and this is no different. Obviously, this committee review is an important step in the process. We will have ongoing conversations with our ARPA experts in budget and elsewhere about how to keep this compliant with ARPA rules, as well as the city attorney's office keeping us in the guidelines for North Carolina law. And then finally, establishing the timelines and resources and project plans when we start launching the actual programmatic elements of applications and assignments of funding and what have you. That is the proposal that's on the table today, and thank you for your time, and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions from council?
I do. Can you go back one slide?
Yes, sir.
So for your tailored projects, and you're saying they're averaging between 15 and 25K, is there a list, or can you provide us that information?
A list of
your tailored projects, that 300,000.
Oh, well, this would be. Thank you. That's actually a great question that I did not have in there. So the tailored projects, we don't know exactly what those are going to look like. That's going to require alliance input. So we would be using a mechanism that looks similar to the Impact Partner Grant to collect ideas from the alliance ecosystem for their individual needs. The biggest difference between this and the Impact Partner Grant is typically the Impact Partner Grant would be applications from various organizations, and then the grant would be paid out to those organizations to invest as they would see fit. With the complications of subrecipients and contracting in a federal ARPA environment, Some of our alliance partners, frankly, are too small, and this would be way more than we should ask of them to manage as a subrecipient, not to mention all the contracts that get involved. So the goal would be, ideally, if we can identify spending initiatives through our alliances, through an impact partner grant application and vetting process, but have it set up to where the investments are direct city investments, where we don't have to go through this more complex subrecipient and contracting process, then that will make it a more practical program. Frankly, if we tried to do it with 17 different subrecipients, I don't think any of us would have the capacity to be successful.
So with that being said, how many recipients? Because I see the average, again, 15 to 25. So if all of them were 25K, that's 12 recipients. So is that the number? Is there a number you're looking at, so that I'm trying to make sure we level set expectations?
Yes.
So
Again, a great question. We can't predict how many alliances are going to be interested to opt in. So, for example, when we did the most recent Impact Partner Grant cycle a year and a half ago with Wish You Were Here and the murals, and you may recall that, it was open to all of our partners, but ultimately only 7 of them chose to participate. So this may be the same kind of thing. There may be some alliances that decide to sit it out for whatever reason, or they all might jump in, and that's why I put the range. If they're all in, it'd be closer to 15. If it's just a smaller subset like 12, then it would be closer to 25. If it's 6, then it would be 50.
And the money goes to the alliance,
The money would ideally
or support the alliance
would
initiative.
support the alliance, but be direct city purchases if we do
Okay.
this right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. This is very helpful, Mr. Weldon. I'm going to start back at the beginning. Just want to make sure I follow the flow of funding here. Prior funding under economic recovery has been $7.6 million already allocated, if not sitting out there. So remaining funding overall for the city from ARPA is $24 million.
That's my understanding, but that
Okay.
remaining bucket I can't say I'm an expert on.
And then the phase 3 project categories, and Lou may need you if you want to, this may be more general. Those 5 buckets that we've been talking about, the future funding will be spread among those 5 buckets. How did y'all determine the 500,000? How did y'all come up with a staff in terms of a recommendation of 500,000 for the Business Alliance assistance?
I will need help with that one.
I'm actually going to look over at Mr. Raleigh, because I'm coming in on the tail end of this. However, do you have
I
any?
can try to take a stab at it, Lou. So, if you recall, this was candidly, it was sort of a roughed up figure. Mary Vigio, our former budget management services director, presented this plan several months ago that did kind of have some allocations in each of these buckets, and at that time, that's when the number 500,000 sort of appeared. I don't know that there was any specific science behind it. It just felt like, that was in terms of what we were trying to impact, a number that was feasible, that would provide enough support to make this a worthwhile sort of investment and move the needle. I know she was specifically sort of responding to some of the requests and conversations that she'd had here and there with some of the Alliance members about some of the projects that they wanted to support. And this felt like, I think, just a good number.
And I guess I'm trying to get to that. Did and you may not have the specific answer, but maybe y'all can come back. Did at least the parameters around this come from conversations with the different alliances at some level?
I don't think the number, the big 500,000 number, came from any conversations with alliances. I don't. Certainly, the proposal that you're seeing now did, but in terms of what that pot would be established at, I am not aware of any conversations that happened.
Well, when I don't mean like interaction with and with the alliances in general. And going back to Councilor Branch's question, because I'm just wondering, sort of how you pick 300 for tailored versus, that, and so I think
Sure.
that's an ongoing part of the conversation.
Yeah,
but
I think honestly, this is some of that same inexact science we used in establishing the 500 is what you see represented here. We wanted to give you some sense because we had 3 investment areas that we were proposing. Wanted to give you some sense of how we saw those funds
Okay.
breaking down. Certainly, this is a point of feedback that we're welcome to, happy to receive if you think that this allocation, generally speaking, is out of line. This was just really a starting point that
Right.
we've talked about.
awesome.
Mr. Knight, I agree too. And if you wanted some flexibility in reallocating that, I think that's certainly we were well within. I think that's one of the reasons why we're here today
Okay.
at the committee. I'd also might point out that the more vague a concept is, the lower the amount that you're probably going to allocate funding to. We procured the hotel. We knew what that was, $10 million. That's concrete, bricks and mortar. The less defined, probably the lower the number when these originally were
Thank you.
spec'd out.
And so, as y'all know, small business support is a priority of mine. I think it's a priority for at least the majority of the council, and especially the folks that are on this committee. And I believe, and I've talked about this, that these alliances, I think, are a major way that we could work with our small business partners to support them and to help them, and also to rebuild as we need to do post-pandemic. So I think this is an incredible opportunity that we have here, and I think we just want to make sure we get this right. So along those lines, and I'm more aware of the ones, obviously the MSDs, and then the ones in my district. Very supportive of those. We all know they're at different scales, right? They're at different places in their formation and evolution. Is there a definition of what a business alliance is to be able to be able to come after some of this money, or go after some of this money?
So we don't have the Knight Business Alliance popping up tomorrow.
That's a good idea. You want to join? Right.
That's actually a great question. Right now, we've been using the if it looks like a duck kind of philosophy that we vet and make sure there's actually businesses that are associated with the business alliances. If I go back one slide, you'll see on the Universal project, going back to that alliance playbook, that we actually don't have a good tool to vet new alliances coming into the system. So we want to avoid a situation, especially as this becomes more of a public opportunity. I could envision a situation where we might have some organizations that we were not otherwise familiar with that may not be as well equipped to actually do this work. So one of the things that is definitely on the map is having a more formalized playbook, and we've learned from our colleagues in Housing and Neighborhoods, the neighborhood folks that have basically a certification process. If you want to register your neighborhood with the city of Raleigh, there's a kind of a basic structure and requirements that neighborhood would do to be recognized by the city of Raleigh as a neighborhood and have access to those kind of resources. So the thinking would be, let's put something like that in place here on the Business Alliance side, so that way as Business Alliance X pops up, we have a much more consistent set of criteria that we can use to understand, are you really a business alliance? Are you really operating with the businesses at heart? And I think really the first layer of, I guess, noise in the system, if you will, might be just a generic, I'll show my age, Yellow Pages directory, for the lack of anything better to call it. And we would want to be able to separate the two from being just a directory or being actual resources for small businesses.
And I think that's important. So I appreciate y'all thinking about that. It sounds like you are thinking about that, especially getting federal funding. I think we do need to have some sort of public definitional relationship with these alliances, because I look at these and some I've never heard of, a couple of them maybe, and do they really fit into what we're trying to do? I'm not trying to keep anybody out, but I think there does need to be some parameters set around it. I was just met with the 5 Points Business Alliance this morning. There's a revisioning going on with the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance, both doing great work. but they need government help. They need city help and support. They're not as big. They're not MSDs. They may want to move in that direction. But I think we have a responsibility and also an opportunity, I think, with this funding to really look at how we can help these small business alliances that are really doing great work, sort of at a micro level in the areas that they exist, with the residents, obviously, that are there, the neighbors that are there, to make those areas as thriving as possible. So look forward to working with you all on this. I definitely want to hear during this process, I hope, Mr. Chair, from the alliances themselves in some form about what they think, and because they're going to be the ones that are going to be partnering with us as this money is being distributed out to the alliances. So that's all I have for now, but I hope that helps. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll open it up for folks who may want to speak who are here. I just want to add a couple things. I think I disagree a little bit about the definition and relationship with what is a business alliance or not. I really want to make sure that we're not creating more red tape and more hurdles to getting folks funded and this money out into the community. And so I don't think we need to be making this more difficult than it needs to be. I would assume that for these allocations, the $300,000 for alliances, there's going to be a submittal process, a proposal process. And I would think that staff during that process could gather the necessary information to determine whether a group that is seeking funding is going to use it in a way that we think is appropriate under the federal guidelines and has the capacity to administer it. One thing that jumped out at me was the equitable development of businesses. And you may have a group that is not as organized or as well connected to resources as another group, but that doesn't mean that they're not worthy of being funded for their project or their needs. And I also don't want to do anything that, like I said, is going to create more red tape and slow things down, which I think sometimes as a government we get in our own way too much, not just Raleigh, just in general. And so that's kind of my thought on that piece of it. So I would think this idea of do you qualify or not, that would be sussed out during the application process. And I don't read this list of alliances that you've put here as sort of the tagging and designation of these are the ones we recognize. Those were examples that you put here.
These are the ones that we work with every day today. Yes, sir.
The other piece of it, and I lost it now, maybe it'll come back to me, but that was sort of my big takeaway. I quite frankly wish we had more money to be discussing during this process, this phase in our committee, but this was the allocation that staff recommended and council approved and sent here for us to talk about. So that's where we're at. I agree with the recommendations, I think, on how to kind of go through and allocate it. And so if you need more feedback from us, please let us know because we want this to be successful. And then I also would I see some folks here from alliances and community. Do any of y'all want to add anything?
Okay. I do have a question.
All right. I'll take it back to council. Go to Councilmember Branch.
So I do ask, because I'm looking at our website of alliances. I know one of our alliances that has, quote unquote, kind of disbanded. It's no longer, it got rid of its charter and everything. So we need to check and make sure our information is current, and I'll follow with you offline on which one it is. And back to the equitable process and everything, and looking at this, we also need to look at areas that could benefit but may not have an alliance. So how do we touch those areas and touch that community that may not be as well organized? And that's the leading reason why some of these funds could possibly be helpful in tailoring and bringing them the information that they need in order for their businesses to be successful. Because if one part of the city fails, the city fails.
Yeah, that is exactly why that last category is up there. And it's not that category is not designed like the tailored projects where we are seeking input, and that's a more passive role for the city because those communication channels are already there. This last category has to be more of an intentional outreach from the city because that's precisely what we're wanting to do, because we know that the businesses that are in parts of the city that have not been served by alliances in the past, their odds of success are going to be, they're just going to be better if they've got an alliance behind them. But they're running their business every day. They're changing light bulbs. They're taking out trash. They don't have time to Google, I wonder if there's such thing as an alliance. It's our role to take that out there. And we are already starting some of those conversations. Example would be the August 6th housing event over at Chavis. We set up a small business table with our housing and neighborhoods colleagues and are able to start having those engaging conversations. There's a lot of work to do, but we have to get more of the city covered by these groups.
And with that said, I know that 300K is not enough for Taylor projects, but for new and emerging alliance, 100 is not going to be enough, because by the time you look at just marketing, making people aware of the meetings and things of that nature, reaching out. So we may want to look at those numbers again, or try to find some math from another area to build these up, because you're right, looking at what we really want to do and really be intentional, that is a drop in a bucket, and it won't even splash.
I fully support math from other areas, and we'll continue to fine tune what we can. But everything you're saying is on our wavelength.
Okay.
Back to a couple of chairman's comments I want to respond to. First of all, so the 500,000 has already been designated by the council.
It has.
As okay.
Yes.
Okay. I would just say, Mr. Chairman, the new and emerging alliances are part of, you're talking about not, we obviously, all the so-called alliances are at different scales. And I think that's where you would look at the ones that are less organized at this point. But I do think there has to be at least a floor, because I think it was, the question is, one, are we just going to allow it for those alliances that already exist? Or, I think there's going to be folks out there that are like, well, okay, I'm going to start an alliance. So I think we got to be thinking about it, and I think we have to make it more organized and put parameters around it to make this run fairly and equitably. And so I think that is important. And I think the service districts, we may need to look, should they be in a separate category compared to all the ones that aren't service districts are obviously are smaller. They don't have the funding already. So I think that's important to think about as we go through this process.
I was going to say, I don't believe MSD should be included because they're already taxing their area.
They're in, at least on the
right.
side. I don't know.
And if they are included, we need to really be specific to the project. Because I think what we have to do is try to figure out ways to lift up. Because we got new areas trying to come up with new MSDs because they need funding. So if we can find ways where they don't need to do that, I think that's a good plus. But I'll be quiet for now.
Okay, what else do you need from us? My takeaway was what I'm hearing from the table is some sort of parameters during the application process to determine whether an organization would qualify for the funding under this model. And then it sounds like a preference to perhaps, when ranking proposals, take into consideration our municipal service districts and their other forms of available funding. And I guess that would go towards the weight and impact that a project may have with this funding when you're sort of ranking them for ARPA money.
Makes sense.
Anything else you need from us, Mr. Raleigh?
I think that's good direction.
Okay. Yes. Come on up.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for this opportunity for allowing us, because I know I didn't prepare anything, but I hope, one, you mentioned about service districts, and I'm sorry, do I even have to introduce myself? Jennifer Martin, Shop Local Raleigh. Do I need to do my address?
No.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned is that there's areas that may be underrepresented or not represented, and that would hurt my heart so much if businesses in our community think that there is not someone out there that's advocating for them and being a voice for them. Please, if you hear, obviously one of the things up there is about, promotion and marketing and awareness. That is something we struggle with every single day, even though we've been here a long time, and I know we do some big events, but people have no idea we're the group behind that. And if you hear of businesses that need help or need someone to reach out to them, I think any one of us, whether it's in our area or not, would be more than willing to have a phone call, to sit with them. As Shop Local Raleigh, we do cover all of Raleigh. And my heart has been letting businesses know that there is someone here that's a voice for them, that's an advocate for them. We have a huge goal of trying to get more awareness and brand of how do we let people in Southeast Raleigh, the Glenwood and 70 side of town, some of those areas, the Briar Creek area, that people may not know that there is someone out there to help them and connect with them and be a resource. And that is a big strategic plan and goal of ours as an organization specifically, is to try and reach those areas and market to those. It's not a lot of money, but I know I speak maybe for another one here that we've never had public or city funding to do a lot of what we do, and we've worked really, really hard, and we're committed to continuing to do that. And we want to be a resource, whether if there is an opportunity, maybe we do choose to apply for those fundings. I don't know yet. We haven't had that conversation that far as an organization. Is this something we'd even look to do? But it's something that we have such a heart for business in our community and for this area that we want to serve and help and connect, and not just have these these funds being a burden, but how can we help be a resource to businesses and letting them know that we as a city and a community do care, there are people here for them, and that we're here to help how we can in their success, whether there's money available or not. We're here as a resource for them. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that may be helpful as a follow-up is, whether your organization applies for funding or not, we don't need to be operating in silos. And so when we're looking at this list of best practices, training, awareness, there may be an opportunity to connect with groups like Ms. Martin's to connect through this process with folks that do come forward that need help.
Sure.
So
We'd
let's
love to mentor
kind
and help
of
with that.
let's keep that communication flowing.
And Mark and his team has done just such an incredible job uniting us from when the pandemic first started and hit. I don't think any of us had truly been united other than a Friday coffee that we would all get together on our own and kind of meet and sit and brainstorm ideas. And now we have the city actually uniting us, which has been great. But maybe it's to a brainstorming session where we sit with your committee of kind of what are some of our goals, or maybe we all collect them, not to create more work for Mark, but maybe if we all put together our strategic ideas and initiatives so that you can review and understand better what all of us are doing as well. Where are we looking and leading as what we've identified as needs in our community, as we're small businesses and businesses in general are hurting or need help and support, just because Raleigh, as you know, is huge. You drive down Capitol Boulevard, we've got businesses over there, you've got all the different quarters and sections where this may not seem like a lot, but it can mean a whole lot to a community that really needs some help and support. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Tara Robbins with the Midtown Raleigh Alliance, and when you follow Jennifer, you just don't really have to say anything because she just checks all the boxes. But just to affirm a couple things, so in the world of community building and business resources, we have been here. As Jennifer and Mark mentioned, during the pandemic, we stopped all of our membership classifications, all of our services, all of our training, all of our activities were available across the board, no matter where your business was or what your situation was. And we really pulled together. And since then, we really have had this kind of family mentality, and it's been awesome. We've just everything's been moving the city forward. And when we found out that this money was available, it was, and specifically designated for business support, I know we were all like, oh my gosh, we've finally gotten to the point with the city that we're being kind of recognized and valued for this community building that we've been doing for a long time. So we're thrilled that we're having this discussion. And I'm afraid, as I listen to a lot of the question and answers going along, that maybe we're rushing this a little bit. I feel like there's still some questions that we're ferreting through. How did we get to this number? What does this bucket include these people? And I'm loath to stop the progress, but I really feel like, some additional thought about, what our goals are here would be really helpful. I know when we've had these 2 kind of deep dive Zoom calls, when we were all throwing out ideas, it all came back to, well, we're not sure if that's going to fly. We're not sure if that's going to check all those boxes that are needed in the ARPA funds. And I know they mentioned you, Evan, as far as you and legal probably being the ones to kind of ferret out what do we even go down this path? No, these type of programs aren't going to work. So that's why I think, maybe we have some categories even fleshed out a little bit that help us, give us some more guidance, because I know we're all really anxious to put quality projects forward that are going to be beneficial, but we may need some more, just a little more guidance.
So guidance as to, you may have an idea, but you're not sure if that would qualify for funding, and then if you go through the process of applying and then get told.
It's the ARPA fund, the ARPA federal government
this
being
be
really,
used-
really good
Yeah.
at giving you 90,000, complications to using this. Is it a result of the pandemic? Can you prove an ROI? Like all of these things. And so there's where some language that says, in relation to proving the ROI, this can be used. In relation to proving
What's
that
the
this
criteria?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I think that's something that, and just knowing how a lot of these processes have worked over the years, today I think was staff, they wanted to know if we think they're going down the right direction. And I think we're heading in that direction. Now, the way I see this is there's going to be another meeting where staff is going to say, well, this is what we've created based upon the feedback from the other committee. And then we can start saying, okay, yay, nay, or add this. Is that probably?
Absolutely, Councilman Branch. I
Okay.
think that's, and to that end, if it is the desire of the committee to have us do that work and then bring it back to the table so that you can see it in its final, close to final form, with all those sort of details fleshed out and taking into account that feedback that's been shared today, we can certainly do that. Or you can sort of turn us loose, send us on to council. We'll still go through that process, but not necessarily have this committee touch it again. It's certainly, we can, either way is fine. It's the wishes of the committee in terms of your desire to see this
That's going
again.
to be my question. Do y'all want this to come back to us, or should we refer it out?
I think it's all about timing. So there's 2 things. Is the time it takes to flush out, get it out, and get it on the streets, and the time that we want to get it out on the streets. And those 2 times usually conflict, because we probably want to get money out as fast as possible, but in order to get money out as fast as possible and do it right the first time, we probably need to measure twice. So I'm thinking in 30 days, is that time to how much time do y'all need to draft it? That's probably the first question.
I
To
think,
draft something for us to look at and then see, and then we can bring it back here. And because I think it needs to come back here to flesh it out, instead of the full council of flushing it out.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to speak for Mark and his team, but my sense, without having a conversation with Mark, is that probably within 30 days we could I think we're clear on some of the fundamental questions that have been raised up. I think that if answered appropriately, the next time we bring it back, I think it will put you as a committee in a better position to feel comfortable with what is ultimately going to be out on the street and in front of the various alliances. I think we can accomplish that by the September committee meeting.
I think my preference would be to let it go to the council. Committee meetings can be fickle. We could not have a quorum I don't want this to be held. I think you have the direction you need on how to stand up a program. It sounds like we need to fine tune the guidelines so the folks who may be applying would have a better understanding of what qualifies, what doesn't qualify. I don't think it needs to come back to us, but that's just my opinion. Councilmember Knight.
I'd like to see it again.
Well, someone make a motion. Are we going to hold it or refer it out?
So I actually had two motions that I wanted to make.
Okay.
My first motion is to be for staff to go back and bring back to our committee some more just guidelines, guardrails, and a better understanding of, especially when you look at tailored projects, and how we're going to move forward in making that selection. So that's my first motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Next.
All right. My second motion is for us to ask staff, full council to review the allocations and see if there's a way to get additional funding for these projects.
So I have some concern about that because it looks like,
I mean, to receive, we have to take. I get that part.
right, but we already approved the amounts to committee, and it looks like GNR allocated their money, Safe and Vibrant Healthy Community allocated half of their money. The only bucket that's pending is the 20 million for housing and homelessness and Safe and Vibrant Healthy Community, and I would hate to pull from that. My thought is we have staff starting the budget process for next fiscal year, and I would think that there may be opportunities to supplement the ARPA funding for these resources that we could look at there. I'm just concerned that it looks like the only place we could take it would be from the Housing Homelessness Initiative, because everything else has been approved.
Well, the other staff, I see they had 320 and they only allocated 160. Do they know what they're going to do with the other 160?
So yes, there's another, I think the food, there were two pieces of that program.
Okay.
One piece was approved, that was the 320. The remaining 160 or so is committed to the other part of the program that was not approved at committee at the same time, but it will be coming back in September.
Okay, well, I withdraw that motion for now.
Can I ask
I
a
think
question
it could
before-
be for
can I ask a
other
question?
funding options.
Our other funding options.
We can look into that question. Certainly,
Yeah.
if there's any unallocated money remaining that could be committed.
There
to
was a
this.
B, which was the Pathway Centers investment, and we didn't get to hear that today, and that was, I think it's 750,000.
840.
I'm sorry?
840.
840, sorry. I mean, so is there, did we get that specific on 500 for this line item and 840 for that line item, or did EDI get a amount? I'll say we could. I'm not saying we will. I'm just saying there could be money within EDI that we can move around. But
So yes, when this was referred to committee by council, it did have those two numbers
Line item.
were line item
Okay.
for those
Yeah.
specific purposes.
So my motion is for staff to look at other reasonable resources to provide additional funding.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do you guys have what you need from us?
Yes, I think we do.
Councilor Knight?
yeah, just Councilor Branch, the questions I was raising were similar to yours in terms of sort of parameters, criteria. That fits in with your motion. All of those things. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. Meeting adjourned.
All right.